spiritual here, okay? She said to me, we were studying families. I suggested him for studying marriage. So she said, marriage. She said, well, I got a lesson. I'll tell you what I think. I said, well, she said she married a hard-working man, and her life wasn't easy. That's what she said. She married a hard-working man, and her life wasn't no bed of roses. That's true, isn't it? You think Joseph and Mary had a lot of trouble? Oh yeah, man. What do you think the greatest challenge that family faced? Every challenge we face today. Yep, that's a great lesson. That's one of the lessons. Whatever he says, just go ahead and do it. Right? Guys, I'll tell you something. I have been on a journey. Woo! You know, my brother died, which that's a hard thing. It's hard for me to get my mind around. And then we have all this storm stuff, you know. And then my sister, God love her, boy, she was such a wonderful Christian. She passed away. She was one of those girls you call, and every time you think about it, I think I should have called her more. You call her, and she was just so encouraging. I mean, just so. And I used to say, you know, if I had a problem, I mean, something I was dealing with, if I wanted her to pray for me, and she said, well, Tommy, again, you got to quit getting bothered by every little thing. I said, Catherine, I'm tired of hearing that from you. You got to quit getting bothered by every little thing. She always had she was a grocery, she had a little grocery store and had a marina. Her husband worked for Save-A-Stop. He put stuff in 7-Eleven shelves and stuff. You need me, Mandy? He put stuff in 7-Elevens and Circle K's and all those little convenience stores. He worked for a company like that most of his life. But she had a little store, and she had a marina and rented boats and sold bait. And so she was quite a character, you know. And so she just had a simple approach to life. That's my oldest of the two sisters, Catherine. But I say, how you doing, Catherine? Well, I'll tell you the truth, Tommy. Here she goes. It was the funniest thing. God is so good. So, we're going to talk a little bit today about working together to reach people. I'm going to tell you, I go back to my foundation, what I was taught as a young Christian. There's some great things God taught me through people. I told you about how God taught me to learn how to think, didn't I? Did you hear this? I told you that, right? Well, all right. I might as well tell you I mentioned it. Not that I've learned how to think, but I'll tell you a story. There's a little video that I watched. It's probably about 8 minutes. And it's a video, I don't know if it was in California or Florida. It looked like it'd been either one place. There's this little coffee shop or a little breakfast shop, you know, you see where seniors go and have a cup of coffee and breakfast. And so they're having a little shop. And so this guy walks in, and he just walks in, and when he walks in, everybody just looks at him. They recognize him. Can't believe he's come in the restaurant. He just walks over to a little table, sits down. The waitress recognized him and thought, wow. She's a little nervous. So she walks over and asks him what he wants. He said, He said, I'll have a cup of black coffee and a pie. What kind of pie? He said, just bring any pie you want. Just a cup of black coffee and pie. John, we leave it ajar there if you don't mind. There you go. And so he was the guy that sat down in that restaurant looking out the window was Elon Musk. And he's there. So he's sitting there looking out the window. You know, he's always dressed about the same T-shirt. And so she was a little nervous. She gets a cup of coffee, pie, walks over, sits on the table. She doesn't tell him she knows who he is. But, he's just sitting there and he's looking out the window, having his coffee, eating his pie. There's all these senior citizens in this place, these men, you know. If you've ever been in a place like that, you know, there's always one or two in the crowd that will embarrass you. So this one guy gets up, he goes over and stands at his table and begins to ridicule him for taking over Twitter and, you know, starting this and starting that. And if you've ever seen him in an interview or anything, nothing rattles a man. If you notice that about him, he just keeps the same. So he explains to the guy, I just want to have something where truth is given. People could, you know, have a place where they can find truth. And he said, you're just trying to make money on people. And anyway, he's badgering him. And so this waitress is watching him. She's bothered by this, you know, because he just came in to have a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. So eventually she gets the courage up and she goes over and she begins to rebuke the customer who's interrupted his time and says, why don't you leave him alone? Let him alone. He's giving you an answer. Let's let him enjoy it. And so now it either goes on her and everything, and all the other customers are cheering in because this guy's talking to this wealthiest man in the world and rebuking him for trying to make more money on people, which is not what he's trying to do. And so eventually he goes back to his seat. She goes, and when he gets done, she goes over. She's really sweet, and she gives him a ticket, the bill. And he asked her, why did you speak up for me? She said, well, I just hate to see anybody, you know, misrepresented, and said, I don't think they know you and they don't understand you. She told people what he did and how he's helped people and stuff. So anyway, he just paid a little attention to it and he left. And so the boss, the owner of the restaurant comes over and rebukes her for scolding his customers and tells her she's going to be fired. He's going to replace her. He's giving her a 2-day notice to find another job. We told her that before Elon Musk left. And so the next morning, she's in there, she's shaking, you know, she don't know what she's going to do. And lo and behold, he walks in the restaurant again. Goes over to the same table, has a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. And she was shocked that he actually came back. And maybe that's when he asked her why she did what she did for him. He said, well, anyway. And he knows she's been fired. So he says, you know, I talked to some of the people we work for. We have a call center. And, you know, they have a lot of nonprofit organizations. And he said, I told him I want you to work for us. You're the kind of people we like to find. So I'm going to give you a job. It's not, you know, it'll be a start. You can learn some things and go forward with it. And so she's shocked. She says, I don't know what to say. He says, just say yes. So she did. So that's the end of that story. So I was thinking while I was watching this little video on it, I was thinking, when he came in to sit down in that restaurant looking out into maybe it was the water or whatever it was, he's just having his pie thing. So what was going on with him? What do you think was going on with him? Yeah, he's just sitting there looking out the window, drinking a cup of coffee, having a pie. What was he doing? Reflecting. thinking, processing. And I thought, here's one of the most brilliant men on planet Earth, sitting here looking out the window. Probably don't know how many places he could go where he could clear his mind and think. And he's thinking. So, what was he thinking? Was he thinking about a new program? Was he thinking about something he could do to help seniors? What was he thinking? We don't know because he got interrupted. So whatever was on his thoughts could have been something. Well, you can hold that just a second because I want to get another point across. So the main thing was that he's sitting there processing this, and I thought somewhere in his life, somebody taught him something. I remember I told you one of the things I learned as a young man was to think. And Dr. Robertson, my mentor, said to me one day, I'm in the office, I'm on staff with him. He said, Tom, do you know the difference between geniuses and us? And I said, well, not really. I was going to say geniuses don't like to be called geniuses, and we do. But I said, not really, because I wanted to hear what he had to say. He said, well, there's one thing. He said, geniuses control what they think about. They can control their thoughts and process it. And so then he said to me, if you can control your thoughts, you can help me in this ministry. And I want to give you some things to think about. Then he talked a little bit about bringing into captivity every idle thought. And so he gave me things, a couple things he was going to do. He said, don't you think about how we could do this? Think about how to do that. And I said, wow, okay. So then the next time I met with him, I had already got some ideas from the Lord, and I told him, he said, that's good. So from that moment, when he was going to do something, he would say to me, hey, I want to give you something to think about. I want to give you something to think about, what I'd seen. He knew I would do it. So if you had somebody you could have confidence, by the way, let's go back to Eli Musk just for a second. Let's say you had IBM, that's your company. What would you give him to clear his mind and think about your business for one solid day, to process what could be done? How much would you pay him just to think for you? Who knows, right? It could be worth $1 million. It could be worth $10 million. But there's very few people like that. And so I thought somewhere along his line, somebody, and that might back to what Delvin was talking about, somebody taught him how to process everything that's going on and to think. And so, his mother said he was the most determined kid she'd ever known in her life. And Delvin says his father believed him. I don't know that story. But can you imagine that, Delvin? Can you imagine he would do that? I mean, he could process things like he does. Yeah. Processing thoughts. My thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways not your ways. Oh, yeah, hearing, yeah. Okay, so my whole purpose of my lesson today, are you ready, Tom? My purpose of my lesson today is to get you to help me think about something. So has everybody got your thoughts, your mind on? Good morning, Gene. So, I want you to think about something, all right? And you can put it, do you have anything to write with? Or would you like me to give it to you later? But just basically 3 things when we get around to thinking about it. But one of the things I learned when I was working with Dr. because that's where I did my intern, that's where I learned about God's work in its simplest form. When I was part of the staff and worked there in Highland Park, in a Sunday school class, one of the things that would be reported in every Sunday school class, whether it was children's class, all the way through whatever, shut-ins, whatever, was the outreach ministries of that class. In other words, the bus ministry. They'd be like young couples would do bus ministry. Ladies would do visitation and different things like that. So every Sunday school class had outreach ministries that were part of the church. And so I learned that if you can get a person or 2 inside an organization who wants to reach people, they can start sharing their faith and doing whatever. For example, they had a lot of carpet factories around there in McKee Bakery. And a lot of the folk worked in these factories. At that time, Chattanooga was the 10th largest manufacturing city in America. I mean, there was the greater Chattanooga area. And so they just made everything you could imagine. So most people who went to Highland Park worked in a factory, did some kind of thing around there. And so they would have in that factory, like these factories would be 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week. They wouldn't stop, you know. So every shift would have somebody who was trying to reach people. So they would have Bible studies. Like people would come early. Say, for example, people would come early for the second shift, stay later on the first shift. So the first 2 to 6, 6 to 2 rather, and then 2 to 10. So from 6 to 2, they would, at 2, the ones working that shift would stay, and the ones coming in from 2 to 10 would come a little early, and they would try to work together where they have Bible study and gospel. That's where we got the gospel hour idea, was that having people inside. And so out of those meetings, every week you would hear people talk about how many people they'd won to Christ and what God was doing, and they would keep up with prayer requests for people, and so they just made contact, and so I was explaining it to a guy. I said, you could do it at Walmart if you wanted to. And so he actually took the challenge, and in his town, he found people who worked at Walmart who were Christians, and he got them in the break room to put up a prayer box, your prayer request, and at lunchtime, they would share truth. Anybody wanted to sit in and listen on it could. And they got something going inside of Walmart, and people start telling you their needs, what's going on. I mean, have you ever had somebody talk to you about a family problem or a health issue or some kind of child? They've told you that. So that's what you find out when you're trying to help people at work, praying for people. So, and that grew, and out of that group, out of those things that they were doing in that tri-state area, because Chattanooga was on the border of Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, and so these people worked in those states. They were able to have ministries in that area. We had 72 chapels in Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama. Those chapels that were connected to that church could help these people on their jobs. Does that make sense to you? There was a connection there. And so from the Sunday school to the actual needs, so we had a way to reach people. So now, we've always had in the ministry people who work on the inside telling people about their faith. I mean, the greatest way to reach people is for people to see them in their highway, in their daily life. How many ever had met somebody on the job you worked, and they were Christian, they shared with you something they learned, or they were somebody that had a need and you shared with them something they needed. How many of you have ever had that happen? Tell me about it. What was something, for example? And whoever. Encourage each other. That's good. That was kind of refreshing, wasn't it? Somebody else have something like that? There you go. So it works. So now we've got a city, unusual city, right here in Lee County. We got an unusual school. Our school has 100,000 students. You know, there are very few school systems in America. In America, that have 100,000 students. And in those schools, we have people from 150 nations. Now, if we have in our city people from 150 nations, and we've been given a commission from God to reach every nation in the world, the gospel must be published among all nations, Mark chapter 13, verse 10, then we have got a head start on everybody because we got 150 nations living in our county. Does that make sense to you guys? I mean, we got a head start. We got 150 nations. If we can reach, somehow or another, get people from these 150 nations to help us reach their nation, and why not? So what we need to do is get these young people who are saved enlisted. If they're not saved, we need to get them saved. So now we've got 4 million, we got 55 million young people in public school. We got 4 million teachers in the public school system. 4 million. How many of those teachers out of the 4 million in public school? Now, there's actually a little more when you get into detail. But how many of those 4 million school teachers in the public school system do you think are Christians? And they would be professing Christians. How many? What would the percentage be? Out of 4 million, how many do you think? So a third, that'd be a good number, wouldn't it? Maybe not that. What if it's just 2%? Or whatever it is. We know there's Christians in the public school system, right? So here's what we do to work together with people. This is what I learned, how to work with people in places. Now, Luca goes into the nursing homes and preaches. And so you got to get people to help you do what you're doing, reaching people the gospel. Anybody on a job, get people. So we do 3 things. You ready? So here's what I want you to write down. 3 things. Number 1, advance the cause of Christ. Get the gospel to people. Advance the cause of Christ, getting the gospel to people. Now that means that we want to make sure we do that. We'll come back and talk about these in a moment. Number 2, we want to bring the next generation forward in the same faith. Teach them what the Bible teaches us. In other words, we're supposed to teach them the Christian faith. Christians, teach them how to live the Christian life. Everybody needs to know how to live the Christian life, right? People say, I'm a Christian, but do they live the Christian life? And number 3, we want to encourage them. So, these 3 things we want to do. Number 1 is what? Get the gospel to people. Get it to all people. Number 2 is what? All right. Number 3 is what? Okay, now, we want to start a ministry reaching our public schools. Now, we have a name and we have a fellowship and we have a thing to do it. But I want to get you to pray and ask God to give you ideas how we can do these 3 things better. Because there's ideas that nobody's had. Now, do you think that Elon Musk gets ideas that nobody else gets? Huh? Would you think he does? How valuable are the ideas he gets? Huh? What if he could sell his ideas? He'd make a lot of money. Do you know God has every idea? He knows everything, doesn't he? Do you think God can give you an idea that nobody's really thought about? I know. I believe that. I believe God lets you, if you'll ask Him, look at things differently and think differently and to get an idea, a thought that could be revolutionary. M.J. Parker, a member of Highland Park Baptist Church, drove a National Linen truck, and he wanted to reach children. And he asked God to give him an idea. Now, this is back in 1938 or 39, 40. And God gave him an idea. God gave him an idea to work an area. He was a National Linen truck driver, picked up laundry. He had his route. And he thought, if we could get a couple in a church to accept the responsibility of a route, an area, so many blocks, and be responsible to get those children the gospel and try to bring them to church, if we could do that, we could take our city and break it down into routes, and we could actually go from house to house, winning children to Christ, getting children saved, and children in return could help us reach their parents. So he started doing that. He went to Dr. Robertson and said, I got an idea how we can reach children, but he says, I'm going to need a bus. I can't get them all in my car anymore. And Dr. Robertson said, if you can get 25 kids here on a Sunday, I'll buy you all the buses you want. And so M.J. Parker went down, because he's on this route. He goes down to a place that makes sporting equipment, and he gets their uniforms and everything, and he that's part of the stuff. And so he says, I need 25 baseballs. I want y'all to give me 25 baseballs. I'm going to get 25 kids to come to Sunday school, and every kid comes to Sunday school, I'm going to give them baseball. And so they thought, okay, we'll give you some baseballs. They had baseballs. And so then he said, every kid that'll come with me, I'm going to give them a baseball. He took his station wagon, filled it up, had over 25 kids come. And so Dr. Robertson then got him a bus. And so then he took that bus and he figured out that area. And then he got that bus filled. And he said, I want to get another bus. I got another area. I got another couple. So he got another couple to work in that area. People that lived in these areas, he was getting to do that. Then he got another couple. And I was actually the bus director at Highland Park Baptist Church after he had a stroke. He had a stroke when he was 74 years old, could no longer work. He never got a paycheck from the church. He was a volunteer. And when I took the bus route, of course, we started building other bus routes. And when I left, we had 65 bus routes around the city of Chattanooga. And preachers would say this about M.J. Parker. He's responsible for getting more people saved in his generation than any other living person in his generation. He got that one idea, then he got other ideas. And so Dr. Robertson would always get people to get ideas how to do something. You understand? Right now, I know no one reaching public school kids in a big way. I mean, there's Fellowship of Christian Athletes, there's other clubs that are in places. But we want to find teachers who can join a fellowship, who will agree with us, train them equip them, agree with us that they want to see people saved. They want to see them taught how to Christian life. They want to encourage them as a Christian through their high school years. Does that make sense to you? That's the threefold purpose. So, let's talk about it. Number one is what? Yancey, what was number one? Again, advancing the cause of Christ and further the gospel. Now, what are some ideas that you think of that we could use to furtherance the gospel? Well, the gospel must be published among all nations and every creature. So why don't you think about it? I don't know. You know what I mean? I got my ideas, but I don't have your ideas yet. I don't have your ideas. And who knows who God's going to give the next great idea to reach public school kids. And so here's the challenge. Ready? So we got 100,000 students in our school system. How many high schools are in Lee County? How many middle schools are in Lee County? How many elementary schools are in Lee County? That's just in our public school system. We're not talking about our colleges. We're not talking about our daycares. So 100,000 students in elementary, middle school, and high school. 100,000 students from 150 nations. 37% of the young people who go to our schools in Lee County do not speak English in their homes. 37%. We have 150 nations, and 37% of our schools do not speak English in their homes. Now look, who can we hire to come and do this for us? Nobody. But we can do something. Wouldn't it be wonderful if somehow we were able to launch something here in our ministry, Five Star Christian Ministry and Gulf Coast Baptist Church? Wouldn't it be something if we could launch a ministry that could reach the public school kids of 55 million around the world? Do you think that could be done? Exactly. So I want you to write your stuff down. Let me know. So Tom says he put the first thing out on the table. Find kids who are Christians who want to do it. But now listen, we got to find teachers. Well, they can't. They have to work under contracts and guidelines. They can't just. But okay. So what I want you to do, I want you to write. Yeah. So what I want you to do is write down your thoughts. What can be done that's not being done now. Right, okay. Yeah, so write all that stuff down and say, put on a checklist. Do we have Bibles? Gideon's does that. Do we have 10 Commandments? Why? What are the 10 Commandments? How we need to explain what the 10 Commandments are? How would you explain the 10 Commandments to young people who do not know? I'll give you a little thought, okay? So one of our young people in public school came up to me years ago and he said, I have to give a report in our class on different things, and because I'm a Christian, they told me in a debate class, they told me I had to debate why we should have the 10 Commandments and taught in our schools and in our places of business. That was mine. And he said, I'm probably the only one in our class that believes we ought to have the 10 Commandments. But he said, I don't know what to say. So I said, well, I'll tell you what you could do if you want to debate it. You could debate on where did we get the Ten Commandments? Where did they come from? By the way, where did they come from? And what group of people got them? Israel. And what did Israel do with them? Well, it's part of their guides and understanding in religion. And where did the Ten Commandments go when in the church age? Did the Ten Commandments continue in the New Testament? Did the first century Christians believe the Ten Commandments? Okay. Now, so going back to Israel, getting them, who is Israel? Israel is who? Who became Israel? Abraham, but Abraham had, yes. So who was Jacob's father? Okay, and Isaac had a half-brother who was who? Ishmael. Okay, now, so there's a split. Now there's a split, right? You know what a split is? Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac he has children, Jacob. Jacob becomes Israel, 12 tribes of Israel. Ishmael had 12 sons. These two lineages began to grow in the world, right? Now, what does the Bible say about Ishmael? The Bible says he's a wild man, his hands against every man, and every man's hands against him. Ishmael and Isaac. Isaac is the faith. He comes Israel. Israel gets the Ten Commandments. Ishmael doesn't get the Ten Commandments. They're not taught in that world, in that lineage. That whole tribe of Arabs and everything, they don't teach the Ten Commandments. Jewish people and Christians teach the Ten Commandments. Where the Ten Commandments has gone, they're not just blessed, but they're nations that are civilized. Where the Ten Commandments did not go, they're nations, that's where nations, a lot of those are terrorists and things. So I'm telling this young man, on 9/11, was it people from the lineage of the Ten Commandments or people from the lineage of Ishmael who flew the planes into the towers? So, you could say the Ten Commandments kept people from flying into towers. Wherever the Ten Commandments has gone and Christian faith has gone, there's a civil, there's nations, civil nations. Where the Christian faith hasn't gone. There's people doing what's right in their own eyes, and all these other religions have sprung up. And evil lives in other religions. So, why do we want to teach the Ten Commandments in the public school system? It'll affect your mind. And they're not, so even if they don't become Christians, Ten Commandments are going to keep them halfway guided in life, right? But Jesus tells us, and Paul writes, that all of this was bringing us to Christ, all this stuff. So there's a lot to be done to reach people with the gospel and to reach people with Christ. The Ten Commandments is a big deal. Although you don't get saved by reading and keeping the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments help you know you need God. It convinces you a sinner. All right, well, we better go. Thank you for watching and thank you for being here. I forget that we're being recorded on this class. But anyway, I hope I didn't say anything stupid. If I did, well, I did. So what do you think, fellas? Do we need to just keep doing the same old, or do we need to let God give us something to reach the world today? We need ideas, yeah. It's not there.